the news from the Sultanate of Oman television. First, the headlines. European Union leaders want to reach a deal to help keep Britain in the bloc. The UN envoy to Syria rules out holding new peace talks in Geneva by the 25th of this month. And Austria begins to impose its new quota system for migrants, as Germany's Interior Minister warns fellow EU states not to take national measures. Those were the headlines, and now for the news in detail. European Union leaders want to reach a deal to help keep Britain in the bloc, even if securing an agreement will be difficult for many countries. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said today. The British Prime Minister David Cameron said he will only do a deal if he gets what Britain needs, as he arrived for continued negotiations at the European Council in Brussels. Cameron said some progress had been made in talks on Britain's future in the EU that ended in the early hours this morning. Britain's future in the Union, along with heightened tensions around Europe's migrant crisis, are dominating the EU summit in Brussels, scheduled to finish today, with what Cameron hopes is a breakthrough deal for EU reform. Cameron says unless he gets the changes he seeks, he will not campaign to remain in the 28-member bloc. British voters are divided, but polls show they narrowly favour staying in. Many leaders say they felt a historic turning point for the European integration. No country has ever voted to leave the Union, but Britain has always had an ambiguous relationship with the bloc, staying out of two of its most ambitious projects, the Schengen border-free zone and the euro common currency. The UN Special Envoy for Syria, Staffan de Mistura, said that peace talks will not resume in Geneva on February 25th. In an interview, he said that real talks about peace were needed, not just talks about talks. Now, the Americans and Russians must sit down and agree on a concrete plan on the cessation of hostilities. Yemeni sources said that the Yemeni forces advanced further towards new locations that were controlled by the Houthi group and their allies in Naham province east of Sana'a. The sources also mentioned that the Yemeni forces also took control of ammunition and weapons from the Houthi group in an area near Marab, and clashes that also led to the death of a number of Houthi militants. This came after the Yemeni forces and their allies regained control of various locations in areas as part of their way to get control of Sana'a. U.S. warplanes carried out airstrikes against Daesh-linked militants in the western Libya today, killing as many as 40 people in an operation targeting a suspect linked to two deadly attacks last year in neighboring Tunisia. The mayor of the Libyan city of Sabratha said that the planes hit a building in the city Qasr Talil district where the foreign workers were living. He also said 41 people had been killed and 6 others wounded. Israeli security forces shot dead a Palestinian man today after he stabbed 2 police officers outside Jerusalem's walled old city as a wave of heightened violence persisted into its 5th month. 2 Palestinians yesterday stabbed and killed an Israeli in a supermarket in the occupied West Bank before an armed civilian shot and wounded the teens. Since October, stabbings, shootings and car rammings by Palestinians have killed 28 Israelis. Israeli security forces have killed at least 180 Palestinians. Austria was today beginning to impose its new quota system for migrants and refugees entering the country. In the latest in a series of uncoordinated measures by nations, Austria announced that it would allow no more than 80 people a day to apply for asylum at its southern border points, including the new checkpoint in Spelfeld on the border with Slovenia, as of today. Meanwhile, Germany's Interior Minister warned fellow European Union states today not to take national measures against a migrant influx that would burden Germany and threaten action if they did. Germany, the EU's largest and most dynamic economy, took in 1.1 million migrants last year, the vast majority of those who reached EU soil, and a backlash is building because of regional authorities' increasing struggle to cope with the newcomers. Chancellor Angela Merkel spent a second day at the EU summit in Brussels for talks on Britain and refugees. Fighting at a United Nations compound sheltering people fleeing conflict in South Sudan has killed 18 people. South Sudan descended into civil war in December 2013 when a row between President Salva Kiir and his sacked deputy ended with fighting that often occurred along ethnic fault lines. The UN peacekeeping mission had said fighting the night before between youths sheltering in the UN compound had killed 5 and wounded 30 after violence erupted between two ethnic groups. The UN Secretary-General spokesman said later at least 7 people had been killed. At least 18 people were killed in armed conflict that erupted in the protection of civilian sites in Malakal, including 2 South Sudanese staff members of Doctors Without Borders who were attacked in their homes. Doctors Without Borders said it had also treated 36 people wounded in the fighting, including at least 25 with gunshot wounds. President Barack Obama slapped North Korea with more stringent sanctions yesterday for pushing forward with its nuclear weapons program. The U.S. Senate voted unanimously to toughen sanctions on North Korea over its nuclear program, human rights record, and cyber activities. The House of Representatives passed a similar bill last month. Lawmakers said they wanted to make Washington's resolve clear, not just to Pyongyang, but to the United Nations and other governments, especially China, North Korea's lone major ally and main business partner. The penalties included the seizure of assets, visa bans, and a denial of government contracts. Still to come in our news bulletin. Scientists proved that dogs can recognize human emotions by forming abstract mental representations of positive and negative emotional states. Welcome back to the news from the Sultanate of Oman television. The economic and social files of the next Arabic Summit in Morocco topped the discussions of the 97th ministerial meeting of the Economic and Social Council of the Arab League in Cairo. The Sultanate took part in the meeting, which discussed a range of topics related to the social and economic sectors of the state members, besides discussing activities of the two sectors between the 96th and 97th sessions. It also focused on a report on monitoring the implementation of the Arab Free Zone, as well as the developments regarding the establishment of Arab Customs Union. It also reviewed the preparations for the social aspects of the 4th Arab-African Summit, due to be held in Guinea in November. The officials during the meeting discussed the implementation of an integrated program to limit unemployment in Arab region. The meeting further focused on a project to contribute to involving the disabled into the local community. The Sultanate's delegation in the meeting was led by His Excellency Sultan bin Salam Al Habsi, Secretary General of the Supreme Council for Planning. An earthquake measuring 5.5 on the Richter scale hit the Arabian Sea. Earthquake Monitoring Center at Sultan Qaboos University mentioned in a statement that the earthquake took place at the early hours this morning and was located 400 kilometers away from Halaniyat Islands. Many dog owners believe that their pets are able to pick up on their moods, but scientists have demonstrated once and for all that man's best friend can actually recognize emotions in humans. Researchers found that by combining information from different senses, dogs form abstract mental representations of positive and negative emotion states in people. Experiments were carried out by a team of animal behavior experts and psychologists at the University of Lincoln, UK, and the University of Sao Paulo, Brazil. They presented 17 untrained domestic dogs with images and sounds, conveying either positive or negative emotion expressions in humans and dogs. The dogs used in the testing were unfamiliar with the procedure, avoiding any chance of conditioning. The vocalization sound accompanying the human faces was also unfamiliar. The results found that the dogs spent significantly longer looking at the facial expressions, which matched the emotional states of the vocalization from both humans and canine subjects. And now for the general weather forecast. Clear skies will prevail over the Sultanate with chances of low cloud and fog late night and early morning in the governorates of Buraymi, South Sharqiya and the coastal areas of Al Wusta. Winds will be north to northeasterly light to moderate, occasionally active on the areas overlooking the Arabian Sea. Along the rest of the governorates, it will be northwesterly light to moderate. Seas will be slight to moderate along the coast of the governorates of Musandam and the Sea of Oman, with a maximum wave height of 1.5 meters, while along the rest of the coast it will be moderate with a maximum wave height of 2 meters. This is the Sultanate of Oman television. Before we end tonight's bulletin, here are the main points once again. European Union leaders want to reach a deal to help keep Britain in the bloc. The UN envoy to Syria rules out holding new peace talks in Geneva by the 25th of this month. And Austria begins to impose its new quota system for migrants as Germany's interior minister warns fellow EU states not to take national measures. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news bulletin. From all of us here at the newsrooms and the studios, it's good night.